I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I know there was a delay this morning, but I don't want to take too much time. So hopefully we can get back on schedule at some point today. My name is Victoria Tiller. I am a middle school teacher in Fountain Fort Carson District 8, and I'm also an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since about 2005. I've started a couple of different businesses, and I've been teaching since 2008. So I try to work both my passions at the same time. You may have some people that would lead you to believe that you can only have one passion, one love. That's not true. Some of us have more than one gift. Some of us have more than one love. And so today I just kind of want to take a little bit of time and share a little bit of my journey with you into teaching, into entrepreneurship, and some of the trials that I've had to overcome to get to where I am today. I can remember back in 2008 when I first decided I was going to go ahead and become a teacher. I had gotten laid off from a sales job. I'm not really a salesperson, but I needed a job at the time, so I decided to take a position in sales, and I was sucking at it big time. And I made a comment to my supervisor that he didn't really like, and so I ended up losing my sales position. And at that point in time, I decided that I was going to go ahead and pursue something that I had thought about for a while, and that was becoming a teacher. So in 2008, I took that step, and I enrolled into an alternative certification program. And an alternative certification program is what aspiring teachers enroll into when they don't study teaching or education in college. In college, I was a business major. So in order to teach, I had to go through an alternative certification program. And so I enrolled into the program, and they recommended, since I had never worked in a classroom setting before, I started working as a substitute teacher. So in May of 2008, I began substituting in middle school classrooms and getting that experience. And my first time walking into a middle school classroom as a substitute teacher, I was very nervous. I can remember when I was a middle school student, and whenever I saw a sub standing outside the door, it was party time. Oh, the regular teacher wasn't there. We were going to clown, we were going to act up, and we were going to make this sub regret the day they ever stepped into our classroom. So I was expecting the students to be the same way with me. So I walked into the classroom with a strong face, a strong attitude, and a take charge attitude to let them know I'm here, I'm in control, I'm going to run this. And at first, they kind of tried me, you know. As teenagers, you do it. You're going to see how much you can get away with. And they did it. And I got a quick lesson in what it's like to be a substitute. But anyway, I continued to sub for the remainder of that school year. And then I had to take my exam to become a certified teacher. And I was nervous. I didn't have any study skills, didn't know how to study. I'd never studied in my life because I didn't know how to do it. No one had taught me how to study. So the day before I was scheduled to take that exam, I sat down and I took the practice test in the book. And then the next morning I got up and I went and I took my exam to become a certified teacher. And then I had to wait about 2 weeks to get my scores. And I got an email letting me know my scores were ready. And I just didn't know how to feel about it because I knew I didn't feel like I was prepared. So I got my email letting me know that my scores were available and I had passed the test. I was now able to call myself a certified teacher in the state of Texas, and I needed to find work. So I started submitting my resume, putting out applications. I got some interviews, but no one hired me. And after about 5 or 6 times of not being hired, I started to get disappointed. I started to think that maybe I didn't have what it took to be a teacher. Maybe I didn't have the potential. Maybe all my friends and family were right, that my demeanor, my attitude, the way I presented myself was not going to afford me the opportunity to step in front of a classroom of students. But I decided I was going to persist, I was going to keep going, and I was going to become a teacher. So in Houston, Texas, they have this large job fair where they're looking for teachers. And Houston is a very large city, the fourth largest city in the United States. So I went to this job fair, and it was a 2-day job fair. And the first day were for schools that were looking to hire elementary school teachers. I didn't want to teach elementary school kids. I knew that my personality just would not work well with elementary school kids, but I knew I wanted a job, and I was willing to give it a try. Like, maybe I could be good at it. Maybe I could be okay with it. So I went to this job fair for elementary school teachers, and I was walking around and I was meeting with principals, and then I met with this one principal, and I told him, well, I really didn't want to teach elementary school, I wanted to teach middle school. And he said, you know what? I have a middle school principal that will be here tomorrow. I want you to come back tomorrow and meet with her. And I was like, okay, great. I walked around the job fair a little while longer, and then I left. I didn't have a lot of money, didn't have much gas in my car, and each day you had to pay an entry fee to get into this job fair. So the next day, I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. My car was like on 30 miles to E, and it took me about 30 miles just to get from my house to where his job fair was located, and I had very little money until my husband's next payday. So I was trying to decide, should I go to this job fair? Should I just pass up this opportunity? I decided, you know what, this 30 miles to E is going to get me home and get me back to this job fair. What little cash I have, I'm going to go ahead, pay my entry fee to get into this job fair the next day. I go to the job fair the next day. I go up to the guy. Principal, I want you to meet. She's not here yet. You know, mingle around. She'll be here soon. So I go. I start mingling. I visit other schools' tables. And I have one school scheduled me for an appointment to interview with the principal. I'm excited. I got an interview. I'm going to get this job. I still had to wait about 30 minutes for that interview. So I said, well, let me go back and check and see if the other principal had shown up yet. I went. She was there. She wanted to sit down and interview me. Meanwhile, I have this other interview scheduled, but I'm like, okay, 30 minutes will be enough time for me to go interview with her and still make it to this other interview. This lady had to be the slowest lady I ever met in my life. She just walked around, this spot is not quiet enough, let's find a quiet space. Then finally we got a space that she felt was quiet enough. And then she was like, you know what, I need to get something to drink. So then she went and got her a cup of coffee, and she came back and she was like, hold on, I got to use the restroom. And I'm sitting there like, oh my goodness, I have an interview scheduled. I'm going to miss out on an opportunity to meet with the principal and possibly get a job. But I was like, I can't be rude. I got to just sit here and smile and be patient. So I went through my interview with this principal, and she loved me. She loved everything I had to say to her that day. And she said to me, I want you on my staff. So I was excited. But I didn't have anything in writing, so her word really didn't mean a whole lot to me. So I jumped up, and I'm ready to go head to this other interview, hoping that maybe I'll actually get something official, something in writing, let me know I had a job for the next school year. And she just looked at me and she said, hold on, wait a minute. She said, I want to go ahead and give you a written job offer today. I want to give you this job offer, and I want you to go home because I don't want you to interview with anyone else and have them take you from me. So that day I got my job offer, and I became a school teacher that next school year. And I say all that to you because I just kind of want you to understand where it starts from. And sometimes you may see yourself in a situation where you really want something, and there may be some obstacles that you have to overcome. There may be some objections that you have to deal with, but you have to always continue to push through. And so my main focus today is speaking to you about you having the power and you realizing that you already have everything that you need in order to be successful. And so for me, the word power, and I've been living by this word for a couple years now, is potential, opportunity, willpower, energy, and resources. You have the power. You have what you need to be able to live the life of your dreams. As we go through this, you'll notice that I pop different quotes up on the board. And the reason I do that, there are two things that I often use to get me motivated, to get me hyped, to get me inspired to get throughout my day. And on my way to work each morning, I listen to music to get me motivated, you know, get my mood right, to get my mind right for the day. And I also use quotes. I'm a huge lover of quotes. So you'll see me pop these different quotes up for you throughout my presentation. I don't know about in your school district. In the school district that I'm in right now, when we send out progress reports or report cards, we don't put comments on them. But when I was in school, we had comments from our teachers on our report cards. And I would often get comments from my teachers that said things like, not working up to potential. And I often wondered to myself, how do you know I'm not working up to my potential? How do you know what my potential is? And a lot of times you'll notice that your teachers see something within you that you don't see within yourself. But that always bothered me, because whenever I went home with a progress report or a report card that said I wasn't working up to my potential, I had to then deal with my mom wondering, well, the teacher says you're not working up to a potential, so you have a B in this class, that means you can get an A. It didn't matter if I said, well, Mommy, I'm doing my best. The teacher said I'm not doing my best. So she felt like there was more into me that I could give that I wasn't given in that class. And so sometimes you have to sit back and think. And a lot of times we reflect on stuff later, and it could be years later, it can be a week later, but we reflect on things that have happened in our life. And I took some time to reflect back on some of those report card comments, and sometimes those statements were true. I wasn't working up to my potential. And a lot of times it was by choice, because I could do just enough to make my mom happy. If I got an A or a B, my mom was happy. So in middle school, I didn't have to work hard for A's and B's. In high school, it became a little bit different for me, but I was making a choice to do just enough to please my mom. It wasn't even about what I wanted. It was about keeping my mom off my back. And so I was making a choice not to work up to my potential. Then there are other situations where that comment of not working up to my potential wasn't quite true. I was working up to my potential. I was doing the best that I could do with what I had at the time. And so a teacher may not be able to understand that. Maybe they didn't understand that last night I just had witnessed something at home that someone my age should never have to experience. And so I was carrying that with me in the classroom, and in that moment, I was doing the best that I could. We all have situations that sometimes you like to say, leave it at home, leave it outside the classroom, but it's just not possible. Sometimes we carry that baggage with us into the classroom. And I always tell my students, if there's something going on with you that I need to know about, if you're having a bad day, let me know. I have them too. And I tell my students when I'm having a bad day, I will walk into the classroom and say, look, today is not the day. I just need you to focus and let's do the work. And they respect that, and I respect them. If they're having a bad day, just come to me and say, Ms. Taylor, I'm having a bad day. It's not the day. Because I often joke with my students, and I have a very sarcastic way of dealing with my class. And so if you're not in the mood for my sarcasm, let me know before I say something to you, and then you just jump off the deep end and get disrespectful. So it comes down to having that mutual respect for each other that will help you to be able to be successful, whether it's when dealing with your parents or dealing with your teachers, anyone that you have to deal with. If you have this mutual respect, you can get further in life than if you just kind of walked around, boxed up, bottled in, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's not going to help you get further than where you are, because then you start to shut down. When you look at this quote from Confucius, it states that the urge to reach our full potential is the key to unlock the door to personal excellence. But the question is, do we ever reach our full potential? Basically, my question there is, is our potential a destination or is it a journey? Dictionary.com defines potential as capable of being or becoming. So do we ever achieve all that we're capable of? And I think that's really up to you, whether or not you achieve all that you're capable of. I believe that the urge to reach our full potential is what propels us to excellence. And it's our belief that believing that we can achieve anything, it allows us to push past any limiting beliefs that have been instilled in us from our family or our friends. We have to, in our own way, realize that our potential is limitless and continue to strive for a better future. My parents, my husband's parents, we both came from single parent homes. Our parents both separated when we were in elementary school. And we both had to live in homes with other family members. I had to live with my great-grandmother and three of my cousins for a while, along with my 3 siblings. So it was about 9 or 10 of us in this 3-bedroom house at one time. My husband went through the same thing in his family. And coming from our families, one, you don't see a lot of long-term marriages, if members of our family got married at all. Not a lot of home ownership, things like that going on in our family. A lot of these beliefs that we carry with us when we're in school, beyond school, come from the circumstances that we are brought up in. Your family members may tell you, you can't go to college. We don't have the money for you to go to college. You can't buy a home. It costs too much money to buy a home. Your credit score has to be this in order for you to buy a home. You need to have this much money to put down to buy a home. We always have people in our families, in our circles, that are telling us that we don't have what it takes. We don't have enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm from the wrong side of town. My family history, I don't have enough money. These are some of the limited beliefs that keep us from making things happen and getting what we want out of life. During my first year of marriage, I got married when I was 18 years old. 2 months after I graduated from high school, me and my husband got married. He was 19. He had graduated the year before. During our first year of marriage, I told him I wanted to buy a house. And he kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but he said, okay, he entertained me. We started looking through some real estate magazines. I talked him into actually going to view a couple houses, and then we put some money down towards a house. And then all of a sudden he told me, we can't do this. We don't have enough money. I was attending college part-time, working part-time, and he was in the reserves and working full-time in a factory. So he was like, we can't afford to do this. So I let him talk me out of buying this home. We didn't do it. And once again, it just kind of came from our beliefs that had been put in us from family members, saying that you need to have at least $10,000, $20,000 to put down to buy a home. You need to have this job. You need to be at this place in your life before you try to do this. And so we decided we weren't going to buy a house at that time. A couple years later, my husband had decided to go active duty in the Army. I still was a part-time worker, still a college student, but I told him again, I wanted to buy a house. This time, he was more open to the idea. He was more willing to do it. And so we went through that whole process again, and we found a home that we both liked. And about a month later, we closed on a house. We bought our first home, and we were 22 and 23 years old at the time, so we were very proud of ourselves. And I can remember my husband, after we signed all the paper to close on our house, saying, you know what, that was easier than I thought. People make it seem like it would be much more to it than that. But all it was that kept us from buying the house the first time was our limiting beliefs, the things that other people told us, you can't do it, you don't have enough. So before we even really took the chance, we quit. So sometimes you have to overcome what people are saying, ignore the naysayers. It may sometimes be your very own parents that you have to just ignore what they're saying. Be respectful about it, but sometimes you still have to go and do what you want to do. You have to live your life. You have to follow your dreams. My first teaching position was in a small school district in Texas, a town called Lamarck. And the school district was in an impoverished community. A lot of my students were either being raised by their grandparents because mom or dad was locked up, mom or dad were addicted to drugs, but they came from some difficult circumstances. I thought that the circumstances that I grew up in were difficult until I learned about the background of many of my students. And so I often would tell my students that you can choose to be a victim of your circumstances or you can overcome them. And that's a very difficult concept for middle school students to understand when you tell them be a victim or overcome. But there are many adults as well that struggle with being a victim of their circumstances. They play the victim role, they give themselves permission to be less than they're capable of because they blame everyone else for the problems that they have in their life. I can't do this because daddy left and he didn't help take care of us. He started another family. I can't do this because mama's on food stamps. She doesn't have money for us to be able to go and do that. We find ways to do things that we really want to do in life. And so if you really want something, you'll work hard for it. If you don't, you'll make an excuse. I have members of my family, whether it's my in-laws or directly in my family, but we were raised in the same household. And you can have people from the same household who live very different lives. Their lives have very different outcomes. You can have one brother go to college and start a career and be successfully managing a business at the age of 24 in corporate America. And you can have another brother that's 32 years old and been in jail, hustling on the streets, drug dealing, and struggling right now to overcome the things that he did in his life that caused him to struggle now. But he doesn't see his responsibility, the part that he played in the struggle that he's going through. It's everyone else's fault. You helped me, but you didn't, you helped him, but you didn't help me. Daddy was there when he was around. He wasn't there for me at all. You could come up with all these different excuses, but you came from the same household. So how can one person in the household overcome the same circumstances, the same objections, go on and be successful, but the other person just kind of stumble and fall and play the victim? It's all about choosing how to play the hand you've been dealt. That's what it comes down to. You can live that woe is me lifestyle, or you can decide, you know what, this is just a stumbling block. I'm going to step on it, step up, and move over. It's totally up to you. When it comes down to it, your past is not your potential. In any hour, you can choose to liberate the future. My husband, he's a big sports fan. So for the past 14 years, I've learned a lot about the world of sports. I've come to be a fan of football, both college and professional. Still hadn't gotten completely into basketball. I can only do the playoffs. Other than that, it's just too much. But many of the athletes that I've seen over the course of the years of watching the ESPN with my husband, I love watching 30 for 30 and all these documentary type shows to learn more about the players. But many of these athletes have inspirational stories of overcoming their circumstances and achieving success in the world of professional sports. One story that a lot of us may be familiar with because it was turned into a movie is the story of Michael Orr. His story was turned into the movie The Blind Side. And he went from being homeless, a struggling student, the child of a drug addict, to being a 2-time Super Bowl champion. Then we all know the story, or you may know the story, of Dwayne Wade, player for the Miami Heat. He grew up in a single-parent home. His mother was on welfare and addicted to drugs. Now he's an Olympic gold medalist and a 3-time NBA champion. There's several victim-to-victor stories out there, some from faces that we're familiar with, some we would not expect. As you learn more about the people that go on to success, you will find that many of them had to realize that they have the power. You too have the same power to achieve the things that you want in life. We all have the potential for greatness. But you have to remember that your capabilities are unique. Your full potential in a particular area may be greater than or less than that of someone else's potential in the same area. What do I mean by that? Even with the best vocal training or working with the best choreographer in the industry, I will never be able to sing like Whitney Houston or Celine Dion. I will never be able to dance like Beyonce. They all have their gifts, and I have mine. You have yours. You cannot measure your success or your potential based upon the successes or potential of others. And you could wonder how I could say that, because growing up, you have people that tell you you can be anything you want to be. You can be president. You can be the best basketball player if you work hard at it. But the truth is, we all have our gifts. If I worked hard, I could eventually become a great singer and dancer, but I still would never be a Beyonce. You may have heard of the quote before, if you shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. So if you work hard and be dedicated, you could become the best basketball player that you can be. You can become the fastest runner that you can be. You become the best writer that you are capable of being, but you can't compare yourself to someone else. When I was younger, I wouldn't try anything that I knew I couldn't be successful at. And I really was that way into adulthood. When I attended my brother's high school graduation, his girlfriend graduated from high school with honors. She received a gold medallion and a silver cord. And when I saw that, I decided that I wanted the same for myself when I graduated from high school. I told my mom about the goal I set for myself. And when I entered high school, I knew what I had to do in order to graduate and get that medallion and cord. And I started working toward it. Here comes my senior year, the year 2000. The counseling office sent out notification to those students who would be graduating with honors. I wasn't one of them. My GPA was a 2.96. I needed a 3.0 in order to get the medallion and cord. I was very disappointed, and I immediately put the blame on my guidance counselor. And I blamed her because my senior year I decided I was done with band after 6.5 years of playing the clarinet. I didn't want to play anymore. And she didn't tell me that I was dropping band too soon and that I would not receive a grade for dropping band. And so instead of getting the GPA that I needed, I ended up just slightly below. But what you have to realize is that reaching your full potential requires you to take responsibility for your actions. I knew what I was working toward. My counselor did not. It was my responsibility to ask the counselor how dropping band would affect my grades. It was also my responsibility to do my best work in all my classes so that one class would not decide if I achieved my goal or not. It's kind of like watching football. Just recently, the big debate over the Des Bryant catch in the Cowboys game. One play should not determine whether or not you win or lose. So when you take the time and you step back and you reflect, you can see that there were other plays, a fumble that stands out, that could also determine whether or not you achieve your ultimate goal. So don't just say, oh, this one thing happened and that's why I'm not where I want to be. Usually there were other signs leading up to that that let you know that you were not on track for what you wanted. When I look back on my situation years later, I realized that I had put myself in jeopardy of not being able to graduate with honors long before my senior year of high school. In 10th grade, I got my first D in a world history class, simply because I didn't like the subject and I didn't put forth effort. In that class, I even decided I would go by a different name. I wasn't Victoria, I wasn't Vicky, I decided I would go by my middle name. Teacher would call on me, and I'm sitting there just clueless, because I decided I was going to be someone else in that class. In 12th grade, I struggled in trig algebra, but I didn't let the teacher know until the last week of class. Many of you have probably done the same thing. I know I have my students come to me all the time. The last week of class, Miss Tiller, what can I do to get my grade up? It's a little bit late for that. Where were you doing week 1? I have tutoring every week. You know this. Where were you? I'm pretty sure your teachers have the same. They probably keep a tutoring schedule posted for you. But you won't take advantage of the tutoring. But then the last week of class, you show up and say, well, what can I do to bring up my grade? You got any extra credit available? No. You have to take responsibility, and you need to do it sooner rather than later. It's been said before that hindsight is 20/20. If we take the time to slow down and assess the situation, if we think about what we really want and the path that we need to take to get there, we can make things happen in our life the way that we want, because we have the power. In the world of education, many of us use backwards planning to help us reach our goals. You start by asking yourself, what would you like to achieve, or what would you like for your students to achieve? Then once you know what you want to achieve, you then ask yourself, why is that important to you? When deciding what you want to achieve, it's important to know why you want it. And Mr. Ian Humphreys, during his presentation, he had up there, remember your why. And that's really what this comes back down to. It's about remembering your why. Your why is what's going to motivate you to keep going. If it's not something that you truly value, or if it's not something that you're doing, if it's something that you're doing for someone else, you may find yourself not achieving the desired result because it's not what you truly want. And then another question to ask yourself is, what will I get out of it? If you ever go to a car lot, or if you have to deal with a salesperson, they've all been taught that the best way to close a sale is to help the person that they're trying to sell to remember what's in it for them. It's the whole what's in it for me. So when trying to gain your personal buy-in to making things happen in your life the way that you want, you need to answer the question for yourself. What's in it for me? Are you doing it for mom and dad? Are you doing it to make grandma happy? Or are you doing it for yourself? And then you need to ask yourself, how will I feel if this happens? When I set the goal of graduating from high school with honors, I knew what I wanted to achieve. I even knew how I would feel if I was successful. However, I never took the time to think why that was important to me and what would I get out of achieving graduating with honors. If I had simply taken the time to ask myself, what would I get out of graduating with honors, I would have realized that I would have done more than earn the medallion and cord that I wanted. But I would also have been eligible to receive the South Carolina Life Scholarship. South Carolina, any student that graduates with 3.0 or higher and a resident of the state, they put forth a nice chunk of change to cover your college tuition. And so if you go to an in-state university, they pretty much cover the cost of your college education if you graduate with a 3.0 or higher. I didn't do that. I got the 2.96. So if I just would have truly thought about what I wanted, I've known that I wanted to go to college from the first time I knew what a college was. So if I truly would have thought about what I wanted, why I was getting this medallion and this cord important to me, what was in it for me, then I would have worked a little harder. I would have taken responsibility, and I would have asked those important questions. And then I would have worked to fulfill my potential. When I was prepared to start college, I started college in the fall of 2000. I had some disappointment and adversity to overcome. My mom only had saved enough money to cover one semester of school for me. I had already decided that I was going to go to a smaller school within my hometown because it would be less. I wouldn't have room and board, tuition would be lower. And I was pregnant with my first child. So I wanted to be close to family, to have someone help me with my daughter when she was born. I didn't qualify for a Pell Grant because my mom had gotten married during my sophomore year of high school, and so my stepdad's income made me ineligible to qualify for a Pell Grant. I was still considered a dependent student. So I was thinking to myself, what was I going to do? I only had one semester of school covered. that scholarship money would have really came in handy at that time. But I decided I couldn't let my failure keep me from my dream of becoming a college graduate, the first in my family to do so. I started my classes the Monday after I had gotten married, and I decided I would figure out how I was going to pay for the rest of my education when the time came. So then it came time for spring semester, and I still didn't know how I was going to pay for my classes. I went and I spoke with a financial aid counselor, and she asked me if anything had changed. Well, certainly things had changed. I had gotten married that weekend right before classes started, and I'd also given birth to my daughter. Well, there was good news for me. I was no longer considered a dependent on my parents. I was now an independent student because it was me and my husband and our daughter. I was now able to qualify for a Pell Grant. And so that was how I paid for my education. I worked hard and I completed my bachelor's degree in 2006, pregnant with my second child. It was not easy. I had to overcome moving to another state, starting at a new school. My husband was deployed to Iraq, and I also had to deal with the death of my father. There were times that I wanted to quit, but I knew that I had the potential to deal with the adversity and to achieve my dream of graduating from college. I also knew why it was important to me. This time around, I knew that I had to graduate from college in order to be a role model for my daughter. I wanted her to know that anything that you put your mind to, if you truly want it and you know why you want it, you can go out it and you can get it. And I also wanted her to be proud of me. I didn't want to disappoint her, and I wanted to make a better life for her. Excuse me, I should have got me some water. There's potential in your possibilities. You have to believe it's possible before you realize that you have the potential to make it happen. Once you know what you want to achieve and you believe is possible, be sure to answer the previous questions of why it is important to you. What will you get out of achieving it, and how will you feel when it happens? Now that you know the motivation for your goal, you need to plan. In order to develop a solid action plan, ask yourself the following questions. What is my plan of action? What do I need to get that done? What will be my biggest challenge? And if that doesn't work, what else can I do? A goal without a plan of action is just a dream. When establishing your action plan, there are recommended steps to make sure they are SMART. And you've probably all heard of SMART goals before. They're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time. In addition to making a plan of action, you need to ask yourself what you need to get that done. Do you need the support of your family? How much money do you need? How much time will it take? When making plans that involves or affects others, it is important to gain their buy-in. Involve those people in the process. If you do not, you may find yourself facing challenges that could have been avoided if you had sought their input and gained their support at the start. Answering the question of what do you need to get this done will also aid in your ability to determine the achievability of your goal. What challenges will you face? It is always better to be proactive rather than reactive. List any potential obstacles that could prevent you from achieving your goal. Think both big and small. Then make a list of actions you could take to prevent the challenges from occurring. While we do everything in our power to prevent obstacles, something is bound to happen that we cannot control. That's why it's also important to have a plan B, just in case it happens. Now that you know what you want, you have to believe that it's possible. And then make a plan and take action. Ready or not, you need to move. The longer you wait to take the first step, the less likely you are to ever take it. Oftentimes we feel like we need to have every detailed plan before we take the first step. The truth is that your plan will never be perfect. It will never be the perfect time. You have to get started and use your situational awareness to make adjustments along the way. There are risks when taking action. There's the chance for failure, but there's also the chance for success. How do you know if your plan will work if you never give it a chance? All the planning in the world is meaningless if you never put it into action. It is important to plan. Remember, failure to plan is a plan to fail, but you don't need to wait for perfection to take action. What keeps many of us from taking actions to achieve our dreams is a fear of failure. Sometimes it's a fear of success. When I first became an entrepreneur, I did not want my friends and family to know what I was trying to do just in case it did not work out. I let my fear take control of how I ran my business. Instead of embracing the fear and finding a way to overcome it, I let it overcome me. I had a great idea and had taken steps to turn that idea into a profitable business. However, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection were enough to keep me from taking actions that could have helped me get my business off the ground. If I told my friends and family what I was doing, they would have supported me. They would have connected me to people that would have helped me out, helped me get some knowledge and experience in the areas that I lacked. But before I ever really got started, I quit. The reason many of us never have the things in life that we want is a lack of follow-through. It's great to have a dream, to make a plan and take action, but what matters most is your follow-through. You have to believe that it's possible to have the things that you want. You have to develop a plan to make it a reality. You have to put your plan into action, and then you have to follow through. When things start to get a little tough, you have to be a little tougher. When your plan starts to look like maybe it's not going to work out, you have to ask yourself, how else can I make this work? If you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. No excuses and no exceptions. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard. The first time you allow yourself not to be accountable for sticking to your commitment, you have given yourself permission to fail. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Those are things that are followed by our regrets. Regrets that are caused by a lack of follow-through, poor planning, not taking action. You don't want to live your life with wouldas, couldas, and shouldas. You need to take action and reach your potential. Then keep pushing forward. Do not live your life as a have-not because you didn't take the chance. Anything worth having is worth working for. A few years ago, in 2011, I decided to open a daycare center in Houston, Texas. Things started out rough from the beginning, but my husband and I, we were committed to opening the center. We carefully planned how we would go about attracting new clients for the daycare center, and the decision to open the daycare center was made after I was laid off from my first teaching position that I had started back in 2008. I knew I would get a few more checks, and I needed to have the daycare center open, up and running before I received my last paycheck. As we started going through the process to open the daycare, it just seemed like there was one thing after the other that would keep us from successfully opening our doors. There were so many things that we had not planned for, that we did not think about. But we managed to overcome many of them. Then we reached the point where I received my last paycheck, and the daycare still was not legally able to open. But we continued to move forward. But things just got more and more difficult. We depleted our savings account, we'd taken all the loans that we could take out, and things started to get uncomfortable financially. A few weeks after I received my final paycheck, we were finally legally able to open our doors. But by then it was too little too late. Peak enrollment season had passed, and we tried everything we could, but we could not get any students enrolled. We pushed forward, but 2 months later, we decided that we could not push anymore. We did not want to risk anymore, so we made the difficult decision to close the daycare center. A couple weeks later, I returned to the daycare center to pick up a few items we had left behind, and some mail had been delivered for me. I started going through the mail. I opened one of the letters. It was from the child care agency that provides subsidies to parents that are trying to work or go to school and can't afford child care. And a parent had reached out to them to get assistance enrolling her 2 children into our daycare. They had tried to contact us by telephone, but on the day they tried to contact us, That was the very same day that we had unplugged the phone from the jack as we started packing our stuff to move out of the daycare space. I couldn't believe it. I was disappointed. We were right at the point of a breakthrough, but we quit. And it's oftentimes right at that point when you're about to bust through that wall is when it gets the most uncomfortable. It's when it gets the hardest. It's the toughest. That's when you truly have to have the willpower. You have to have the energy to keep pushing forward. I went home and I told my husband about the letter. I even attempted to reach out and contact the lady that wanted to enroll her children, but at that point she had already found other daycare for them. All I could think to myself is I should have just hung in there just a little while longer. If nothing else, the phone should have been the last thing that I took out of the daycare space. I often reflect and think to myself that if I just waited a little while longer and gotten those 2 children enrolled, the rest of the children would have come and I'd be running a successful daycare at this time. But sometimes things don't work out the way that we want them to for a reason. With the daycare failure, and I say failure at this point, but I really don't look at it as a failure, I first blamed it on the contractor that I work with. I was in victim mode. It was everybody's fault but mine as to why I didn't get that business off the ground the way that I wanted to. But then when I reflect back on things, I realized that it just wasn't time for me to have that daycare. The timing was bad. If I'd had that daycare open and successful at that time, it would have been difficult when my husband got orders to report to Colorado. We found out at that time that I was pregnant with our 3rd child as well. So that meant we would have been separated during my pregnancy, and we would have continued to be separated as he lived in Colorado and I in Texas, because I felt that the daycare wouldn't have been mature enough to be run without my presence. So sometimes it doesn't mean never. Sometimes it just means not now. You have to work a little harder. You have to learn a little bit more in order to get yourself ready to really get for what you want. So while the daycare didn't work out for me then, I know that in the future I will be able to open and run a successful daycare because of some of the lessons that I learned during the process of opening the previous center. One thing I want you to realize when it comes to you, your teachers, anyone in your circle, is that we're all works in progress. I'm a work in progress. When I wrote my speech, I contemplated about writing what I felt you should hear, what I felt you needed to hear, or just speaking from my heart and what was moved in me to say. And so it was a lot easier to go with speaking from my heart. I hope that you take something from it. Oftentimes when you come to presentations and you hear from a motivational speaker, or if you've ever read a self-help book, you want to know that it's possible to live the life of your dreams. You want to hear stories about people that have been through what you've been through, who felt the things that you felt. And that's why I'm here today. I want to let you know that there are people that have had some of the same experiences as you and that have worked to overcome those. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm closer than what I was before. I am a work in progress. I want you to know that I understand how you feel and to tell you that it's okay to have those feelings. I know what it's like to be from a single parent home, mom on welfare, witnessing abuse in my home, having a parent incarcerated. I know those things. I know what it's like to grow up without money. I know what it's like to not have the possibility of being able to attend college. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel failure. I know self-doubt, but I also know that you have to overcome these feelings. You have to rid yourself of the negative energy and replace it with positive energy and positive feelings for you to be able to reach your goals and to live the life of your dreams. You can have the life that you want. You can make things happen, but you have to always remember that you are a work in progress. I am a work in progress, and I know that anything is possible. Even once you reach your goals, you will want something else. you will continue to want more. You'll continue to want better for yourself once you reach that first goal. You will realize that there is more within you. You have more potential and will work harder to reach the next level and then the next level. Again, when I was a child, I always dreamed of becoming a college graduate and earning my bachelor's degree. Once I earned my bachelor's degree, I decided I wanted my master's degree. Once I got my master's degree, I started working on my doctorate. And I'm still continuing to pursue that dream of one day becoming Dr. Tiller. I am a work in progress because I still have the dream of running a successful daycare center. I am a work in progress because there are so many things that I still want to achieve, so many things that I still want to do, and I know that they are all possible. Sometimes, as you're following your dreams, you find yourself making a compromise between what you want and what people feel like you should have, what people feel like you should need. I have, even in my 30s, I never desired to disappoint my mom. Sometimes I compromise what I really want in order to not be a disappointment to her. In order to be successful, you can't compromise. You have to go after what you really want. A lot of the people that you know today that are extremely successful is because some of them just have this selfish part of them. And I'm not saying that you have to be selfish, but sometimes you just have to realize that it's about you and you have to go for what you want. So be willing to sometimes say, Mom, Dad, I have to do this for me, and go after what you really want. Realizing your potential is not a destination, it's a journey. Reaching your potential is about giving your full self. Until you've given your full self, until you've put it all on the line, you do not know what you are fully capable of, and therefore you've not reached your full potential. In science class, we discussed potential and kinetic energy. Potential energy is stored energy. Kinetic energy is energy in motion. In order to reach your full potential, you have to release that. In order to reach your full potential, you have to release that potential energy. And the way to release that potential energy is by knowing what you want, making a plan, and taking action. Therefore, you turn that potential energy into kinetic energy and get closer to living the life of your dreams. And I have one last quote for you before I leave, and it's not up there. And it's one of my quotes that I love, and it's from a motivational speaker, coach, politician, Marianne Williamson. And she says, "Let your light shine for the whole world to see. For when you do, you give others permission to do the same." This is my first time ever doing something like this. I've never gotten up and spoken to a group of students before in this type of environment. The only groups I ever address are those in my classroom. So I hope today that I've said something, that there's some small nugget that you can take with you and apply it to your life. I thank you so much for your time, and I want you to know that it's your time to shine, and go get yours. Have a good day.